President Trump has unveiled a new 20-point peace plan for Gaza after his White House meeting yesterday with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The proposal calls for an immediate ceasefire, the return of all hostages within 72 hours, and a phased Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Hamas members who lay down their arms would be granted amnesty or safe passage, according to this deal. A new board of peace led by Trump and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair would oversee Gaza's transition, backed by an international force to provide security. Trump says most parties have agreed, but warned that if Hamas rejects this deal, Israel would have full U.S. support to continue its military campaign. This comes as a new poll finds that American attitudes towards Israel's war in Gaza have changed drastically since it began nearly 2 full years ago. The latest New York Times and Siena College poll finds that 51% said they are either strongly or somewhat opposed to the U.S. providing additional economic and military support to Israel. 58% said Israel should stop its military campaign in order to protect against civilian casualties, even if not all Israeli hostages have been released. Even more said Israel should stop its military campaign in order to protect against civilian casualties, even if Hamas has not been fully eliminated. A lot for us to unpack here with retired CIA officer Mark Polymeropoulos. He's an MSNBC national security and intelligence analyst. I've never tripped up on your last name before. Has to happen sometime. It is early after all. But look, I was watching this press conference yesterday. I thought it was notable that they didn't take questions at the end of it. It seemed to me like they were trying to preserve the potential for this to get signed onto and actually become the next phase of what's happening in the Middle East. But it also felt like there were several ways that this plan could just go off the rails and land us right back in the position that we're in. What did you see? What's standing out to you?
Well, first of all, there was, a lot of kind of flowery language that Trump used. This is not the kind of dawn of civilization. I mean, it was a little bit kind of weird at times. But when you kind of cut through all of that, look, this is a plan that actually looks very similar to the Biden plan from last January, a phase 2 part of the deal that ended up falling apart. So
we never got to phase 2.
We never got there. There are elements of this that are actually quite good. And ultimately, the ball is in Hamas's court. But Ali, you're right. There's a lot that can go wrong. First of all, Hamas could reject it. Apparently, Egyptian officials in Qatar have presented this to the Hamas leadership there, and so they're going to take a look at it for several weeks. But really, and I don't think there's been enough focus on this, Israeli politics. Prime Minister Netanyahu has to sell this to his extreme right. The Israeli Knesset, their parliament, their Congress, is out of session until October, so he has some wiggle room now. There's not going to be, the Israeli government won't fall if his right-wing coalition partners pull out. But there are parts of this that they won't like. And so, look, I don't want to be the skunk in the room. This is not, for example, forced relocation. It's not ethnic cleansing. There's no Gaza Riviera. There's good parts of this. There's a lot of challenges ahead. And, Ali, one key point. The Trump administration has to actually be really front and center in the diplomacy here. Is Trump going to get bored when things get tough? Because there's a huge diplomatic effort still ahead, and the Trump team has to be really on the ball.
And I think there's a recognition of the role that he singularly has to play here when you put him as the head of this board. I liked the way that he feigned reluctance to that yesterday, saying, well, I have so many other things that I have to do, but I will also do this, as if this hasn't been one of the central focuses of the Trump administration, both in its first iteration and now in its second, although the stakes are so much higher. Can you talk about those stakes? And then when you layer it over the polling that we just talked about, the way that Americans have really changed their views around Israel, despite the frequent reminders of what happened on October 7th, this war has changed perception of the country.
It's interesting. I think Trump himself realizes the war has to end. He actually alluded to the protests in Israel. It's kind of interesting that he did so. I think, and there's been plenty of reporting on this, that the Trump administration and Trump in particular have kind of had it with Bibi, with all the intransigence. So, there was a little bit of kind of daddy's telling you to stop right now. He actually forced the Israelis, forced Bibi to apologize to the Qataris. For the failed strike on the Hamas leadership. But, Ali, you make a great point. That New York Times poll was shocking to me. And if friends of Israel in the United States are not concerned about this, I mean, the majority of Americans don't favor continued economic and military aid to Israel. On top of that, more Americans favor the Palestinians over the Israelis. The Israeli embassy here in D.C., the Israeli MFA, have a massive task in order to regain American support. And the first thing is ending the war. So let's see if Netanyahu can sell this back home. I don't know. I'm still a skeptic.
You're still, well, and his political fortunes have so long been tied to the incursions that they are making in Gaza. You've been really good, I think, about pointing that out. The way that he's not just doing this because of 10-7, though that is certainly one of the key rationales here that he and Trump both continue to offer, understandably so. But he also has been really fighting for his political life back at home, and this has been a lifeline. When you talk about the Trump-Netanyahu relationship, I thought seeing it on display yesterday was so fascinating. You had Trump making him apologize to the Qataris. You also had Trump referencing the protests back home that are pressuring Netanyahu to bring the hostages home to end the war in Gaza. But then you also had Netanyahu bring up the strikes that they did against Iran, for example, that initially the Trump administration had some skepticism about, then, of course, came on board for. It felt like their relationship was very much in full view yesterday.
Right. It's complex and it's fascinating.
Yes.
Again, now, I think that there is some, historic affinity there. But again, but Bibi also manages to alienate every American president with intransigence and kind of going it alone on some things. So how that evolves will be interesting. There are parts of this where there still will be a divide. For example, the Palestinian state, a future Palestinian entity, which Trump mentioned. It's in the peace plan, which is anathema to Netanyahu, and of course the possibility of annexing the West Bank. So there are still some hurdles to overcome here. A good day yesterday, but not the dawn of new civilization.
Well, it's in the peace plan that there will remain a Palestinian state. But you had Netanyahu there going after countries that recognize Palestinian statehood. Even yesterday, he did it at the UN as well. But then also in that peace plan, delineating who the leadership body can be within that Palestinian state, that it won't be the Palestinian Authority, that it won't be Hamas. I think all of those are important guardrails that we're watching them put on this process. And we'll see ultimately where it goes. Retired CIA officer Mark Polymeropoulos, thank you for walking us through all the dynamics to this.